We are excited about the elaboration room.
I am excited about this.
Welcome to the Elaboration Room with Reverend Yo and Reverend Harris.
Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us in the Elaboration Room with two sisters of one. Tonight, we bring with us a special guest because we always tell you we're not counselors and we're not doctors. We're not experts. We just give you something else to consider. But tonight, we brought a certified grief counselor on to help us with this segment. Her name is Cindy Bostic. I have known Miss Cindy for a couple of years. I have done a couple of workshops for her with her self-esteem that she do every year for women who are just struggling in life and need to know that everything is going to get better one day. So I have a lot of ties with Miss Cindy. I was also their Woman of Excellence of the Year in 2021. I think I was 2021.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, 2021. So Cindy and I have a good relationship. I find her very informative in the information that she's going to share with you tonight. She is also the executive director of today's Women's Foundation, where this year they have made me an ambassador, and I am just so flattered by that. So she also holds a Master's of Science in Human Behavior. So that just gives you a little bit of who she is and what she does to let you know what she's going to discuss tonight with us in the elaboration room, that she knows what she is talking about. So after Reverend Sister Agent T gives her entry, I am going to give the floor to our guest tonight, Cindy Bostic. Reverend T?
Well, we all know that grief is a difficult season, and everyone goes through it at different stages. So I am excited to hear Miss Cindy as she elaborates on this subject, and hopefully you will share your comments and your opinions, whatever you wanted to say, in the comment section of our broadcast, because I feel like we're just going to be enlightened tonight.
Me
so
too.
Go ahead, Miss Cindy.
Miss Cindy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ladies, so much. It truly is an honor for me to be in the elaboration room. I have watched your shows from afar, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this important, tough topic. It's a passion of mine. I consider myself to be a grief educator. So with that, I would like to share my screen and we'll go from there. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, you know, people have expressed the experience of grief in many different ways, using all kinds of metaphors. Things like, it feels like being on a roller coaster, to feeling like a volcano, to an onion, because there's so many layers. This is probably my favorite descriptor of grief. It's like the ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm. Sometimes it's overwhelming. And all we can do is learn how to swim. One of the toughest things for me as a counselor is, I'm a fixer by nature, and I can't fix this. So, but I can certainly educate and walk with folks through the process. We live in a culture that is ill-prepared for death on many different levels, including spiritual level. In our Western culture, we know that 100% of us is going to die, but avoidance and denial are common human responses. We need to talk about death. I don't know about you ladies, but in my family, it was, of course, acknowledgement of the passing of loved ones. I'm thinking back to, when I was a young girl. And there was internal grieving, but there wasn't an expression, an outward expression of that grief. And folks just kind of, pulled themselves up and got on with it. But there's something to be said about resiliency, but we need to face where we're at and the feelings we're experiencing. So if you guys are okay, what I would like to do is start with a quiz. Don't get scared now. We're all learning. So there are 10 statements here. And when I read each one, I want to hear from you. Is it true or false? So the first one, only the loss of a loved one can cause grief. True or false?
False.
That's true. Can you give us some other examples?
I have felt grief in, say, the loss of the whole Black Lives Matter situation and the loss of people that unnecessary, it's just the cruelty.
Oh, yes.
So it doesn't have to be someone that is a loved one specifically to me to bring me grief as far as sadness and feeling remorse, and just maybe because I wear my feelings and emotions on my sleeve. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's false because I feel upset or some type of grief when children are murdered or children die, or even a good friend. It doesn't necessarily have to be a family member. It's just, someone senseless of death. To me, I feel some type of sadness for those individuals.
Absolutely. And, people grieve other non-death related events like job loss, relationship loss, health loss, financial loss can cause, feelings of grief. So yes, you got that right. So number 2, you grieve less when you know someone is going to die.
Absolutely not.
False.
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 You're
all day long.
All day.
Yes.
And twice on Sundays. I mean,
That's no.
It doesn't make it any easier.
No.
It truly doesn't. There's a term for it called anticipatory grief. But it's still rough. So you got that right. Number 3, the first year is the worst.
False.
False.
Correct.
It can be many years to come.
Yes, because I'm still going through.
Yes.
And it's been many years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Number 4, women grieve more than men.
False.
False.
Correct. Men can grieve differently than women, but they grieve.
Yes.
And you guys know they do.
Yes.
Okay, you guys are doing really well. Number 5, after the death of a child, having another child lessens your grief.
False.
False.
That's
right. A child is a child.
A child,
that's right.
Yes. And that one child cannot be replaced.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. Number 6, you can have a continuing bond with someone after they die.
True.
Yes.
It's true, but it should be a healthy true.
That's right. And we're going to get into that.
Okay. Yeah, it should be a healthy true.
Yeah. A healthy bond.
Yes.
Okay, number 7. Eventually, you will stop noticing and or being affected by grief triggers. True or false?
False.
False.
Yep. You guys are right on. Number 8, children should not attend funerals.
False.
False.
That's correct. The key with children is to prepare them.
Yeah.
Children do well when they know generally what to expect. So yes, having conversation, maybe giving them the choice, depending on their age. So yes, you're right on. Number 9, the goal of grief is to find closure.
I don't know that one.
Yes.
How do you find closure in grief? Well, we should find closure in grief. So I'm gonna say that one is true. Only because I had had a serious every year grief with my great grandmother who died now, and it's been over 41. She died when I was 41 years now. And I just recently put a closure to the grief of me, going into this place of really deeply missing her and wanting to see her every year on her birthday. And every December, I would just like get in this slump. And I had to come out of that part, and I had to put closure to that because it was affecting who I was at a certain time of the year. So for me, I'm gonna go with true.
For me, I have tried to find that. I have tried to find that closure. And so maybe the goal of grief is to find closure, but how many people really do? So Cindy, you're gonna have to, because I'm not gonna answer that one because I don't see it. I have not gotten there, and I've tried.
Yes. Well, the answer is false.
Oh, okay.
There is peace, and that's what I hear Yolanda saying. There is peace and maybe a more settled feeling, but you're talking about losing a significant loved one in your life. And that doesn't end. And I'm going to say more about that when we talk about continuing bonds.
Okay.
So yeah, but I hear what both of you ladies are saying. And then the last one, grief follows distinct stages.
False. Because I know there are stages to grief, but like the anger one, I will go back to it. So if I'm not going boom, 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 those are the stages, but I'm going boom, boom, and then maybe I'll go back because it's my brother, and I get angry with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about your loss. Grief does not follow distinct stages. So false is correct. And I'm going to say more about that shortly too, but I want to talk about numbers for a minute, because we have a situation in our nation, in our communities, in our families, bereavement by the numbers, because the death of a loved one has ripple effects. Before COVID, on average, a little under 3 million people die in the United States a year. And, during the COVID years, we exceeded 3 million.
Yes.
Here's the deal. Each deceased person leaves behind an average of 9 close relatives / friends. 5 to 10% of grievers suffer complicated grief or prolonged grief. And I'm going to say more about that. And actually, that number is higher. Since COVID, it's 10 to 15 or more % of people who are experiencing complicated grief. And then a little over 7% of children suffer the loss of a parent or sibling by age 18.
Wow.
This last one, 54% of adults who lost a parent before the age of 20 struggle to find grief resources. And I know you guys are ministering in the community. I get calls from across the country from people, care providers who are looking for counselors in our community to talk to. It's a huge problem. And Yolanda, this is why you will remember this from last year. Our foundation created a $10,000 endowment for students at Victor Valley College who are studying to become a mental health care provider, because there's just such a deficiency.
Yeah.
So what that looks like, those numbers, 10 million deaths over the last 3 years has yielded 90 million survivors in the United States, which equals the population of our top 3 states, California, Texas, and Florida. We have a lot of grieving people. And I don't know about you guys, but there was a world pre-COVID, an imperfect world, and the world we're in today. And human behavior has changed.
Definitely.
Yes.
People
Definitely.
are angrier.
Yes.
I contend a significant issue that we're dealing with is that ripple effect of death. I told you guys I was going to share a little bit of my story. If you look to the left, prior to 2012, in my family, we didn't really have significant loss, of people really close to us. My mom died on Valentine's Day in 2012. 2 years later, my sister died of breast cancer in 2014. And then 2 years later, my aunt Inez, who was my dad's sister and also my mom's best friend, died. And then came the year before COVID. My cousin Najee committed suicide in May. My husband, Clark, died 2 months later in July. And my dad died 2 months later in September.
Wow.
And then came COVID and the lockdown and the isolation. You guys remember what that was like.
Yes.
And for me, I prayed to God for direction because, I was going through this personal pain and I was looking around at friends and other people in the community. And I asked God to show me where he wanted to use me. And he answered quickly.
That's how he does it.
Yes.
That's how he does it. And the direction was, you need to support grieving people. So I returned to school, and in 2020, it was a year of study, which was also therapeutic for me to understand, what I was going through. And I obtained my certification in 2020 and began running support groups in January of the following year. So in 2022, I ran via Zoom 6 8-week support groups. And I didn't know how they were going to work, if they were going to work, if folks were going to show up. But I'm here to tell you it did. And I made some great friends in the process that I'm still in touch with. And today the work looks like workshops and along with individual counseling. So that's what brings me to this work. I love it. Like I said earlier, I feel like I'm on sacred ground when I'm with people talking about just, some of the most painful or one of the most painful things in their lives.
Tune in next week for the conclusion of this episode, part 2, where Miss Cindy will go into the difference between grieving, bereavement, and mourning. See you next week in the elaboration room.
The Elaboration Room with two sisters of one. Make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode every Monday at 6 p.m.